So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce you to the female powerhouse, Miss Kimberly Kovacs.
Oh, thank you, Tracy. So good to see you. It's been a
You.
while. How's Sophie doing?
She is so healthy and doing so great. She is thriving. She's off treatment for over 8 months now, and we actually are really enjoying life, even though we're stuck in home, probably like you
I was
are.
going to say, yeah. Well, I'm stuck in my virtual office over here at ArcView, but no, it was great. And one of the most precious moments I had, we were doing a panel together for a group of advertisers in Los Angeles, and Sophie came on stage and asked if she could recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
She
And it
did.
literally brought the place down in tears. It was just such an emotional thing. So anyway, thank you for that. And thanks for being and letting me be here. I'm really excited about, cannabis and hemp and, just the whole thing. And so in trying to decide what to talk about this morning, today during this webinar, there's a lot of great speakers lined up, people who are experts in the industry, such as Tracy and others. You're going to be hearing from some great companies. But what could I share that is really relevant, I think, for a lot of you out there, and from an ArcView perspective, which to me is really a playbook, and how to invest in hemp, and kind of what do investors really look at when they go through and they're making their investment decisions. And so we're going to have kind of a 4 or 5 step approach to this overview. I'm going to try to go, sort of as quickly as I can through some of it, and then spend some time on the more important stuff. But the first one, and as an angel investor myself, and by the way, I joined ArcView several years ago before taking the helm as CEO. But really what it is, get educated. And what I mean by educated is really understand the industry in which you're going to invest in. And in this case, hemp is the industry that we're talking about. And so there's a lot of different places to go. So we've got ArcView Market Research, which we do in conjunction with BDS Analytics, and we put out industry reports and so forth. Some of them are free, some of them you need to pay for. As a member of ACA, BDSA has a free white paper about the hemp industry and how it's different from THC and various things like that. The other thing that's really interesting is there's a lot of governmental sources, especially as hemp now is legalized in the US. Department of Ag, and so that's their website right here, has a lot of really interesting information about farming and what the Department of Agriculture, their oversight in this industry. We also have NCIA, and there's a whole host of others. So, the first thing I would say is, really get educated about what this industry is all about. And then the second part of that is not just getting educated, but now to start to deep dive and start doing research. So as a cannabis investor, that's what I did initially. I took the time to understand what the industry was about. And then secondarily, I started to get real granular on the different parts of the industry that I was going to then be interested in. So what is it, right? Which states or regions can you actually go into and see? Can you invest, ubiquitously between, different states in the United States? Absolutely. There's a lot of now hemp legislation that is really, directed state by state. And there's actually this really interesting site called the National Conference of State Legislatures. And they produce a report, down here, this link at the bottom on the left-hand side, of different states that have different hemp type laws. So some allow farming, some allow consumption and production and different things like that. So understanding which state laws have will also help you kind of create this, what I'll call investment thesis around hemp in this playbook. The other thing is, what kinds of hemp-based products do I want to go after? Tracy was mentioning, the effects of CBD and things that we can ingest and take either in our body or on our body as topicals. That's the CBD market. But there's a lot of other things with hemp too. There's the industrial applications, there's textiles, there's, food and grain and different things and different parts of the hemp industry. There's technology, there's banking solutions. And so I think, as we start to kind of really look at this and you decide which areas you want to invest in, really understanding those nuances and differences. So then the next thing I would say as a newly minted or soon to be hemp investor is don't do it alone. Okay, so when I was first investing in cannabis, I made a couple of investments, one in an ag tech company actually, and we killed the cannabis plant. And that's because I didn't know enough about the science of the plant, but I knew about technology and I knew about some of the biotech enhancements that we were working with in other types of plants like grasses and ornamentals, but cannabis was so unique. And so for me, joining ArcView and being able to join forces with people who really understood this industry was paramount for me to start making some wise decisions. And so ArcView has a big history. We've been around for 10 years. We see, literally thousands of different companies a year. We select the top of those to come and present to our members. We also have what's called the ArcView Collective Fund, where we also see another layer of companies and do a collective membership review of those. So we've invested over $300 million into the cannabis industry, ArcView has. And we also have about 25 SPVs that we're still managing and growing within this industry. So now that you've been educated in the industry, now that you've done your research and you've decided to join forces with, let's say, a group like ArcView, what is it that you want to invest in? And so this, to me, is sort of the fourth step in creating your playbook, which is create a thesis. And I did two examples on here because this is actually two areas that I'm interested in. And I would say pick at least two, maybe three different parts of the hemp industry that are interesting for you, that maybe you can bring some personal experience. So for me, it's technology, and I really enjoy biotech and also things around, I would say, core technologies like fintech and others, and then also CPG companies. And so here's some things that I've created for my own investment thesis that I want to hold true to as much as possible, but it also helps me create an opportunity to get matched through the ArcView platform with the type of company that I'm interested in. And so, for example, on a CPG company, do they have more than one product? Are they currently in revenue? Do they have a solid marketing and social media strategy? What about their competitive analysis or positioning? And the other part for me is, do they have CPG experience? So they need to have someone on their team or in their advisory that has that experience, especially in the market they want to go in, which is really critical for us as we were doing MyJane, for example, and understanding the women's market. Then let's say I want to invest also in the biotech sector. So the companies that I'd be looking for, are they international or not? Do they have patents, or are they working toward getting patents in their space? Is the market large enough for what that particular biotech company is solving for? And again, do they have the right leadership and team? And if they don't, do they have the right advisories? So these are the things that I sort of really take note of. And I create, as I said, this playbook. But as I start to really delineate the specifics of my investment thesis, it helps me get matched with companies like Wolf or BevCanna coming out of our ArcView platform, so that I can start to see the companies that really make sense and match for me. So the last thing I'm going to say, which I could probably go on for many more hours in talking about cannabis investing, but is to seek great advice. So the show that you're going to see today is going to give you some nuggets of information, and I would say absolutely keep doing that. So things that we're talking about right now, our members are talking about. Do you invest in private companies or public companies? There's a lot of, things happening right now in the public space. So maybe private company is the place to go. Are brands a good bet right now? We're focusing on consolidations and different things. But one thing that's really interesting with brands right now, Tracy, and this is something maybe you guys are looking at too, is, there's some net new consumers with COVID and all these other things and focusing on health and wellness. And so, we're looking at those too, and net new categories like beverages. Those are pretty hot right now, or cold. And then the other one is like new things that kind of give you a new view. Are they global? Are they long-term? Like things like biofuel and textiles, some really cool stuff happening there. So anyway, so just to kind of recap is really understand the industry, get some research under your belt, build up your own thesis. This is a team sport, and welcome to ArcView.
Kim, with the COVID-19 and what's going on with that currently, how have you guys really pivoted your view on companies? Because I know there's been so many companies out there struggling to really make it in this new environment. It's been a mess in cannabis. I haven't been able to pay as much attention to hemp because we haven't quite dove into that side of things yet. But what are you seeing change, and how are you pivoting in how you choose companies to actually invest in?
Yeah, so it's, great point. And absolutely, the investment community has pivoted and is looking at things very opportunistically. So a couple things. One is deliveries and what I'd say touchless technology solutions are really hot right now because, consumption is up. I mean, that's the beauty of this whole thing.
Yes.
I mean, unfortunate that we're in COVID, but, people are really turning to cannabis as opposed to, other things like, alcohol or whatever. And so, consumption numbers are up. People do not want to go into a dispensary, so they want it delivered. And they also want the touchless technology, so they don't have to handle cash, which actually leads into another point, which is really promoting legislative change for like the Safe Banking Act. So there's all these really positive things. I mean, we were deemed essential. Going from illegal to essential, I mean, what, in 18 months? That's insane for California. So we have so much opportunity. And I think, the entrepreneurs are getting realistic now. They're being very cash efficient. They're being really smart with what they're doing. And those that are doing that right are getting funded.
I have one more super quick question from the audience. Yeah. We only have like 1 minute left, but due to recent C-19 lockdowns across the country, many states, counties, and cities have suffered from drastic reductions in tax revenue, sales tax, hotel taxes, etc. Do you foresee more states, countries, and cities legalize marijuana medicinally or recreationally due to the new tax revenue? And we have about a minute to answer that.
Yes, so I would say 100%. In fact, there's more cannabis regulatory or cannabis legalization on the dockets for city councils than ever before, especially in California. And I was actually a little disappointed that Anaheim punted it, but they were going to actually make a decision, which they've been punting this decision for a long time. But just think about that. Disneyland's been closed. Mm-hmm. How much revenue has been coming from Disneyland to the city of Anaheim on an annual basis? A lot, right? And they're going to have to fill that void, and cannabis is really a great solution. And because they're looking at their neighbor next door, which is Santa Ana, having, no additional crime, actually cleaning up the streets because of the revenue they have. I mean, there's a lot of positives. And so Anaheim's looking at that going, maybe we should. And they are. So if you look at the city dockets of these city councils, you're going to see a lot more cannabis as a potential solution there for them.
Well, thank you so much, Kim. It was so great to see you today. Wonderful.
See you. Thank you. Have a great show today. I can't wait to see the rest of it.
Thank you so much. All right, guys, our next speaker is Mr. Bob Hoban. Bob is the founder and president of Hoban Law and sits at the center of the world's largest commercial cannabis industry network. Bob has earned a reputation as a cannabis industry deal maker, representing startups, entrepreneurs, and companies in all stages of development. Hoban Law is the world's leading cannabis industry law firm with offices in 17 states and 10 nations abroad, with over 50 attorneys who specialize in all aspects of commercial practice surrounding the cannabis industry. Bob was recently named a cannabis law trailblazer by the National Law Journal and has been consistently recognized as one of Denver's top cannabis lawyers for over a decade. This guy really knows what he's doing. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to introduce to you Mr. Bob Hoban.
Tracy, thank you very much for the warm introduction, and it's my pleasure to be here today. Looking forward to the rest of the program, and looking forward to talking about one of my favorite topics, that of course is the hemp plant.
Thank you, Bob. Floor is yours, sir.
Well, as I think about things over the last couple of years and how this industry has evolved, I used to make a suggestion that, do we really have a hemp industry, or do we have a CBD industry? And I would think that over time, the focus on CBD has gone so far to one extreme that it's kind of bounced back into the middle. And I would suggest very clearly to everyone today that we don't even have CBD as an industry. It's been relegated, properly so, to an ingredient. And it is an ingredient. And as such, to Kim's points a few moments ago, is it the biotech, the bio side, or is it the CPG side? These are critical components, but we've seen those things get put into their lanes as either medicine or wellness or food products. But also what we're seeing is this resurgence, this explosive growth in what I would call the full plant use. And we'll get into that in a little bit. What I want to talk about today really has two different sides. What has COVID done to impact the industry? And what's the outlook in that regard? And then what do we see, generally speaking, for the remainder of 2020, which has been a difficult year thus far for so many people, for so many reasons, but there is still a lot of positive things to look at as it relates to this plant and this industry. So what I'll talk about is sort of against the backdrop of regulations and the market numbers, looking at the economics, looking at the data to help drive those decisions. It's more context than anything else. So let's start with the COVID point. It does not necessarily seem to resonate with so many people, but deals that have been in existence prior to the COVID did in fact go through, and in our experience, most of those deals had closed. A large number of those deals had gotten restructured, perhaps because of the uncertainties associated with the pandemic, and there still are a number of those very same uncertainties. But at the end of the day, we did see many of those deals from an M&A perspective go forward. We also saw that the industry itself has been robust in that reporting from a number of our clients in the US and around the globe, that activity was up in some months and stable in other months. So it seems to be a good situation to operate in because of the public health nature of it for folks engaged in the CBD industry that have already had good, reliable distribution. But what we've seen is more of a focus on new deals coming to the table, sort of evolving to the higher level uses of the plant. Things that aren't as quote unquote sexy as cannabinoids. We're looking at more ag-based or infrastructure-based plays. The days of investing in extraction labs in the United States, I wouldn't say they're over, but there's been a huge build out of the extraction infrastructure, borrowing a lot of natural products, herbal products, and marijuana-related technologies. That infrastructure build out came to a screeching halt last year when so much of the oversaturation of the plant biomass really created a place with the lack of FDA regulations where products couldn't be moved as easily into the marketplace. And with that saturation and with that high capacity for extraction, a lot of folks found themselves with nothing to do and no ability to move their product. So that focus has led to infrastructure development, ag-based development, harvesters, decortication, which removes the fiber from the plant, of course. We're looking at the derivatives of the plant from a cellulose, heliulose, lignins, and sugar perspective, and the various sectors that those parts of the plant ultimately do service. We're looking at seed conditioning, seed cleaning equipment. Yes, there's extraction in these facilities, but farmers are moving because of USDA regulations towards a more whole plant use. No longer is the majority of what's being planted focused on feminized varieties just for cannabinoid production, at least in the United States. And I'll do a brief comparison of the US versus what's happening in the European Union here in just a moment. But let's continue down the road of COVID. We've also seen an impact on the food supply chain outside of industrial hemp, of course, because of interruptions in processing, because of lockdowns, because of transportation infrastructure lockdowns during the last several months. This has created a protein deficiency with a number of supply chain nations around the world that has exacerbated their existing protein deficiencies. Of course, hemp can fill that. So we've seen grain demand and grain pricing increase, although not remarkably. It's still not a scenario where comparing hemp grain to grain from other plant materials is apples and apples, because the price for hemp grain remains so high, and it just hasn't been integrated yet into the world food supply chain as a major component. Although we're seeing those doors begin to open and continue to open. In fact, a lot of the Canadian supply was ultimately replanted here in the United States because of border crossing and international commerce concerns, at least, that evolved and emerged during the early days of COVID. We've seen folks selling CBD make claims. CBD products make claims that somehow CBD can cure the coronavirus or address the symptoms. And we've seen crackdowns at a number of states. It certainly hasn't given the industry very, very much credibility in certain circles, but in other circles, it has the utmost credibility. We've seen the United States federal government issue a research panel under its National Institute of Health to study the use of cannabinoids for the treatment and or impact of the coronavirus on human beings. And we've seen positive results come out of that. We've seen news stories from different research firms around the world indicating that the anti-inflammatory properties combined with other properties within the industrial hemp plant found in cannabinoids and terpenes actually help mitigate symptoms of the coronavirus. But it still doesn't mean that folks can go out and make those representations and those claims when they're selling products in the marketplace. And that speaks to perhaps the level of sophistication of the industry operators, although it's gotten remarkably better over the last several years as it moves towards a mainstream product, or at least mainstream ingredient at brick and mortar stores all around the world. We've also seen the evolution of smokable hemp products and even THC products that come from hemp on the really, really aggressive side of the industry. And those had been exposed in part by the COVID scenario and the slowdown, which has brought attention to businesses that otherwise might slip under the radar. And finally, as it relates to industrial hemp and COVID, we've seen a major incorporation of hemp or cannabis generally as a plant species into economic development plans around the world. We saw the Costa Rica president about 2 months ago come out and said that cáñamo, industrial hemp, would be a centerpiece of that country's recovery from the economic downturn suffered several weeks ago from COVID, which has likely only been exacerbated now, particularly due to the surge in COVID cases across Latin America. We've seen the same notion about cannabis come from the Colombian government, the Brazilian government, the Mexican government, and their nationalized healthcare systems. So the opportunity that exists for what was previously an export-only market, Latin America, now looking at domestic distribution, in cooperation and in coordination with nationalized healthcare systems, creates an opportunistic scenario for folks in the space that have the capability to produce high-level consumer-friendly products on an international scale. So then we move forward and we look at what 2020 has yet to provide for this industry. As I mentioned, I do see much more of a focus from an investment perspective amongst our clients and our clients that are operators, where the investment's coming from, along the lines of infrastructure development. If this plant is going to follow the rules that the USDA set out, then it requires a shift in focus away from cannabinoids only, which is horticultural style, to a more ag-based style of how to produce plant material that comes from industrial hemp. And it protects farmers under the USDA rules to effectively require that plants be planted that service multiple industries, not just a unstable cannabinoid marketplace. So we've looked at the supply chain development. The 2018 Farm Bill, of course, removed any question about industrial hemp and its legality. It removed hemp and all of its derivatives, compounds, cannabinoids. That's not a quote, that's a paraphrase, but it's a very broad exception under federal law to remove the plant and all of those materials from the Controlled Substances Act. That's led to uncertainty, it's led to hesitation, but it's also led to the FDA stepping up and identifying what the pathway is. Now, we haven't seen final rules from the FDA yet. To date, under the 2018 Farm Bill, we've only seen the USDA, the Department of Ag rules, which allow state programs to be adopted and approved, and then create a pathway for farmers to produce legal material under both federal and state law. But what has yet to happen is the FDA has yet to come out and say that these are the rules. This is the pathway, this is the lane. Although it is very likely that the FDA, wink, wink, follows the Colorado model of the hemp foods policy. In other words, that hemp plant-based derivatives under a certain milligram content will be situated as food products, and if there are modifications made to the regulations or an exception, as supplements as well. And of course, you're going to have cannabinoids be introduced as active ingredients in a number of new drug applications over the next number of years as major pharmaceutical companies step into this space. As I alluded to earlier, there's sort of a divide about what's happening in the US versus what's happening in the European Union. And the European Union is probably the second largest market of consumers to provide cannabinoid-based products for human consumption to and into. And there were thousands and thousands of brick and mortar stores that sold these products until recently, when plaintiffs' consumer protection lawsuits, because of something called the novel foods issue in Europe, limited that distribution in brick and mortar substantially. But the focus is very much on the development of the CBD industry right now in Europe. Whereas in the United States, the CBD, the cannabinoid industry, has emerged and evolved to rare and seldom identified cannabinoids in terms of large commercial distribution. It's evolved past that to this full-blown plant approach, which the USDA encourages and perhaps even requires, which is interesting considering the European Union has had these products in the marketplace and regulations for so very long, prior to the US putting the 2014 Farm Bill in place. And now all of a sudden, they're back to where we were a couple of years ago. But we need to see consistent regulations come out of the European Union, the UK, no longer a member of the European Union, and the United States to set the world standard for both the use of isolates and broader full spectrum compounds in food products. We've seen that there are these 1% countries that allow up to 1% THC content in the plant material, at least presumably getting advantage in the cannabinoid market, but they become less advantageous when they look at a full plant use ag-based commodity marketplace. And that's kind of the shift we're seeing. Plus, I would venture a guess that once Customs and Border Patrol understands that 1% THC hemp outside of the United States, absent a federal change here in the United States, would be considered marijuana, and stops imports of hemp-derived materials outside of the United States. So having the 1% THC is actually not a benefit except for efficiency purposes, but for marketplace and regulatory purposes, it might even be a detriment. As we look at the FDA rules come out and we look at different countries around the world, we've seen our neighbors to the immediate south and the Mexican government move forward on a plan after they previously allowed North American US-based companies to register CBD products with their FDA equivalent called Cofepris. And that is something that we saw that stopped. And now we see new laws and new rules being enacted in Mexico, which will prompt regulations in the beginning of 2021. We've seen the Anvisa nationalized healthcare system in Brazil take a stand in favor of replacing prescription medications with low-cost plant-based medicines for purposes of budget and public health, and that's moved forward. And then we've looked at the stability of pricing. We have not seen stable pricing in the cannabinoid marketplace to the point where one day they're here, one day they're way down here. And that's in large part because of the oversupply, but also because some of the folks that you'll hear for the rest of the day, they'll talk about pricing indexes and pricing standards, a critical thing to pay attention to as an operator or as an investor in this marketplace, so that you understand, A, how to structure a contract in a volatile marketplace in terms of commodity or wholesale and retail pricing, but also how to modify that in the event of drastic market changes so that we don't see deals that are set on firm numbers simply fall apart because of the inability to perform. But I do see a lot of promise with what I'd call the new hemp economy occurring and being driven in North America through innovation in the ag sector. Not to say that cannabinoids don't have a place, they have a major place. But as we look at fuels, and as we look at the building blocks for plastic, and as we look at graphene as a superconductor, and as we look at other uses of the plant material, We see oil and gas companies from Texas taking major research steps forward. We see plastic manufacturers of water bottles across the country, retailers that use plastic bags, looking at hemp-based packaging. We see Fortune 500 companies looking at hemp-based packaging. So those are all things that I see coming in 2020, which is very exciting. And with that said, I'd love to take a couple of questions here, Tracy, or if you could help point out where they might be on my screen.
I'd be more than happy to help you with that, Bob. So much information. Thank you. It's really great to see you again and learn so much incredible stuff about hemp. So we have two questions right now. Question number one, when do you foresee the banking industry finally accepting hemp businesses as legitimate? Does hemp need to be legal federally for the current climate to change?
So hemp is indeed.
Did you hear me
legal
okay, Bob?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, sir.
All right. Hemp is indeed legal federally. And banking should not be a problem. I say should, but of course, we've seen banks that have either failed to understand or failed to recognize what's clearly in black and white words in our federal laws. So that's required. As lawyers, we've been able to turn those banks around almost 100% of the time and say what you're dealing with is a legal substance. But then sometimes they make the distinction of, well, if you're growing a legal plant versus a plant material, a CBD product, for example, that's not yet regulated by the FDA, that means it's illegal. Well, that doesn't mean it's illegal. It just means it's not affirmatively regulated as CBD. But these legal nuances are sometimes lost. So banking is and should be available. There's no 280E tax issues that the marijuana or the cannabis side of the industry faces. And if there are banks that refuse to work with you, there is a number of others, but there's also ways to change their mind based on facts.
Yeah, the cannabis industry has been super tricky around getting banking. And now that in California, there's such a big spotlight on it, people are really struggling with trying to figure out how to bank their money. So we have a COVID-19 question. During COVID, I saw a lot of supply chains being disrupted in terms of packaging. Many brands receive their packaging from China. Do you see more brands switching to solely purchasing packaging supplies domestically now? And does that give startups like myself bringing hemp packaging forward an advantage? It's a great question.
It's a great question. I think that, yes, it gives you an advantage because of the decreased participation in that supply by those Asian countries, China in particular. But here's an interesting thing. We've seen Mexico step up to the plate in a major way and replace a lot of the packaging needs for a lot of this entire industry. Percentage-wise, I can't tell you, this is not scientific, but I do know that dozens and dozens of people that I've worked with, reviewed contracts for, that they've gone to Mexico to get Mexico to provide packaging for them, which has been an increase in the Mexican economy as well, but also a nice segue for Mexico as a soon-to-be major world participant in the global cannabis industry, which I can't even believe we're talking about, which is so exciting.
I know this whole situation with COVID has been really interesting. And I noticed earlier that you had brought up the point about, there being a light being shown on CBD and cannabis for COVID. And I just wanted to kind of jump in and have a quick little 2-minute conversation with you while we have a couple of minutes left with us. We've been actually doing research with Dr. Anahid Jewett, and we have shown that by taking cannabinoids, and we're not sure if it's CBD or THC or a blend of all, because we're studying the blood of these patients, that it's turning the natural killer cells back on, which is the leading part of our immune system. And there's now research coming out of Canada showing that cannabis consumption can boost the immune system and help fight COVID by 70 to 80%. I actually really truly believe that this is the case, and we think that we're going to have research pretty soon that helps to support that initiative, because what we're seeing come out of China is that the COVID-19 is killing and destroying the NK cells. So what happens when you have obesity or you have cancer or you have an immunological issue, you already have a broken natural killer cell system, you're already susceptible, and COVID is coming in and wiping the rest of that out. Well, cannabis, CBD products actually turn that system on and boost it up. So that's one of the exciting things that I hope we continue to see, which will help potentially get us, more regulatory around this incredible plant.
No, it's very well said. By the way, here's the way. This is a lawyer's way of describing science, which is never a good way to do it. But think of two pieces of Velcro, right? When you use a cannabis formulation, it takes that one piece of Velcro and turns it upside down. And then what happens? So the exterior Velcro is COVID. Your body is the other side. It doesn't allow, it creates a situation which mitigates the opportunity for the virus to interact with your body and actually attach to the human body and the human body systems. That's my lay description of what I understand it can do. But mixed with other things such as something called NAC and something called mullein and something called vitamin D3 and melatonin and quercetin. There's lots of combinations that they're studying right now that seem to have an impact. But even if they do, and I believe that they do, to your point, Tracy, that doesn't mean people watching or listening can go out and put a product out in the marketplace and said, look, this is what that does. And unfortunately, that's not common knowledge all the time.
I know. Tell me about it. But we'll get there, Bob. I have all the confidence in the world that we'll get there. And thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. I would ask everyone to give you a round of applause, but we wouldn't be able to hear them. So I'll give you one myself. Great to see you. And thank you again for today.
Appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to move on to our next speaker, who is Miss Julie Lerner. She is the founder and CEO of Pan Exchange. She is the leading benchmark provider and institution's grade trading platform for physical hemp and other commodities. Lerner began her career with Cargill International in Geneva, Switzerland, and later moved on to Cargill's senior Latin America sugar trader. She's worked in electricity markets for Sempra Energy Trading and in agricultural weather derivatives with XL Financial. Geographically, her area of expertise covers the US, Europe, Latin America, and East Africa. As managing director of Golden Seeds, an angel group focused on early stage investments in women-owned ventures, Lerner provided entrepreneurs with strategic business advice and access to funding. Please, ladies and gentlemen, help me in welcoming Miss Julie Lerner.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Can you hear me okay?
We can, Julie. We can hear you. Yep.
Excellent, thank you. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and it's great to go right after Bob. A lot of the comments I'll be making dovetail nicely off of his presentation, and I'm absolutely convinced that he was a commodity trader in a former life, because he's got amazing vision on where this market's going. So what I'd like to do today is, in the short amount of time we have, I just want to talk to you from US investors from a commodity market trader's perspective. So as Tracy said, I do come from the physical side of the business with Cargill, Sempra Energy Trading. Electricity was the first new market I was in when the market became deregulated in the US, and then weather derivatives as well. So we'll talk about these next 5 things here. And let me just jump right into it. Let me tell you what Pan Exchange is. We are the leading benchmark price provider in US hemp markets and the only institutional trading platform for hemp. It's not our first market. We have over 30 different agricultural products in East Africa that are available for negotiation and trade. And we're the de facto benchmark price and trading platform for the 120 million ton specialty sand market that's required for oil and gas. Just a note about the benchmark pricing. We prefer to call ourselves a price discovery platform, and that's because anybody who submits data on our site is a vetted member of our exchange, which is to say a grower, a processor, a trade house, or end user. A typical price reporting agency would also take values from a broker or industry analysts. We don't feel that those prices are reliable for our methodology, so we don't use them. And most importantly, the majority of these prices come from real bids, offers, and trades that are on the site. So it doesn't get any more objective than that. This slide, I made this slide a year ago and weirdly didn't have to change it for today. And it felt really bold to say a year ago that cannabis is never gonna be a commodity and hemp is a commodity out of the gate. And there's just a couple of key points here. First of all, since last year, there hasn't been another state that has both medical and recreational cannabis legalized. This is not a trend yet in the US. One of the biggest things is the hindrance of interstate commerce. A surplus in California stays in California. You can't move it to another area. But the biggest reason why You will see a hemp derivative contract on a major exchange for price hedging and so forth. And why it will never happen in marijuana is because commoditization is inconsistent with branding. So marijuana is taking on celebrity endorsements, it's marketing brand names, whereas out of the gate, CBD, hemp for CBD, we're just talking about percent CBD for biomass, whether the crude oil is winterized or non-winterized. You trade it and you negotiate it based on specifications. So that less bold of a statement today, but pretty important. So this slide here is the foundation of pretty much the rest of what I want to talk about. Here in Colorado, we have the University of Colorado has the JP Morgan Commodity Center, and they invited me to present this white paper on the commodity market evolution. Because when we look at new markets at Pan Exchange, we found that there's a very distinct path to maturation. If anyone wants to geek out on commodities, you can find this in our blog. I won't tell anyone. So the easiest way to understand this is let's look at the far right, okay? This last step, which is focusing on operating efficiencies. So these are your cash crops, corn, wheat, and soy. This is energy markets, it's metals. This is where your big trade houses are. We call them in ags the ABCDs, which is ADM, Bunge, Cargill, and Dreyfus, and so forth. So what's happened is these markets are already sophisticated price hedging with futures contracts. They have vertically integrated and then even pulled back again. It's nearly perfectly competitive. So the last place they can go now to focus on growth and new profit is focusing on operating efficiencies. Unfortunately, most of them are hoping that blockchain is going to be the answer for them, and it won't be. So sorry about that. So let's go back to hemp and go to the far left side. So the very first state of a raw material that's becoming a commodity is this concentrated supply chain. So here's where surety of supply, just make sure you get me a product on time that's consistent quality. That is the #1 priority. And price doesn't even come into focus then. The next step, which was accentuated in hemp with the 2018 Farm Bill, new supply enters the market. Now, usually these new suppliers are either technologically at an advantage or geographically advantageous to the incumbent. But two things happen. The buyers are less worried about where they're going to get the product, and price becomes the most important thing. So this is where Pan Exchange comes in. So the cash market begins, we do our benchmark pricing, and of course, the oversupply happens. So you can see here that hemp for CBD is between this third and fourth section here right now. If we're talking about hemp for fiber and herd, we're really, really as far left as you can go at the infancy. We have people coming to us and asking us to help build a market in industrial fiber. But the reality is these, you need to be building your direct relationships between buyer and seller. You need to be growing to specification with regard to hempcrete and plastics. You need to talk about durability, for example, making sure the machinery runs smoothly. For textiles, you need to make sure it's got the resilience you need. And then you need to go back and grow it to scale the following year. So you can see how far we have to go for fiber and herd market. Also, I don't think you'll ever see somebody who's running an online exchange talk about this either, but the key going forward at any stage of maturation is to have your dedicated supply chains as well as have in hand in the cash and spot market, and that's where we play at Pan Exchange. This is the difference between being a market maker and a price taker. It gives you the most optionality, information, and leverage to negotiate half of your deal flow directly and the rest in a spot market. So unique factors here, funny thing, this was last year, and not much has changed here. The pace of change is unprecedented. There's a near complete lack of infrastructure, but we're doing a lot better now, and it's still very fragmented. Things we need to look for today. Sorry, I didn't realize they were timed. Again, the pace of change is still unprecedented. Prices of biomass from July to this January were down 84%. And they continue to fall further on the refined side. This is because the biomass, as you all know, was refined to preserve the quality. And it's really important to understand and accept that we're going into this crop year with a very large oversupply. CBD, as Bob said, an ingredient market. And a little bit of hemp goes a very long way. I'm very bullish about CBD as a product, but it will become a specialty market in comparison to fiber, herd, and feed. And by volume, this is going to become more of a cash crop like corn, wheat, and soy in the long run. It's going to be about economies of scale. We're a couple years away from an exchange-traded derivative. We're working really hard to bring that to you. And we're not going to see major trade houses come in for at least a couple of years, bringing much needed liquidity and taking some of the counterparty risks and credit risks in this market. I'm out of time. I will put this into the chat channel of some more resources on forward contracting, knowing your nomenclature, and so forth. And I'll turn it over to Tracy.
Julie, that was amazing. I just had a quick question about there being this this excess of hemp now available. Do you foresee the COVID-19 affecting the prices that we're going to see hemp going for because of this oversupply?
The prices will have less, it's less about COVID and more about the oversupply in general. So prices will likely decrease a little bit more from here. There might be some supply chain hiccups getting things to market, but it does come down to who, I mean, our past two presenter talked about, unbelievable that it went from a controlled substance to essential. So it depends on where it is essential and where it's not essential. I think that's a big demand factor. It is going up in general, very slightly.
Yeah, it's been incredible to see such a transition from us being looked at like criminals to being so necessary for people with health. So especially me being in medical for so many years, it's been a real treat watching us finally start to get a little bit of that recognition. Well, thank you so much, Julie, for coming today. That was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you. I'll see you a little bit later on the investor session.
I'm excited to see you there.
Okay.
So we're going to move on to our next speaker. This is Mr. Nick Easley. Nick is the CEO and Managing Director of Multiverse Capital and is a globally recognized cannabis industry expert. He is also the founder and CEO of 3C Consulting LLC, the nation's leading strategic cannabis consulting firm. Nick and his team have worked in 16 countries, 34 US states, and 2 territories, assisting nearly 500 cannabis companies across all sectors of the industry. He is a committee or board member for multiple cannabis industry organizations, including a board member for ASA, Americans for Safe Access, which is a favorite of mine. Nick recently educated delegates on medical cannabis at the UN Intergovernmental Expert Group meeting, which is super impressive. And he consulted them on international challenges posed by the non-medical use of synthetic opioids. Nick has received many prestigious industry awards and is a veteran of the United States. Thank you for your service, Nick. With that, please help me welcome Mr. Nick Easley to the show. Nick, the floor is yours.
Super. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully this technology works well. I think you can see I'm still in my COVID beard contest, so a little different than normal, and being able to adopt a different type of suit coat up here in the mountains of Colorado. So really appreciate the time, everybody. Great speakers before, great to see Bob and everyone kind of getting together. We have less time that we're wasting on our commutes and so forth, and a lot of time to focus on this industry. And you know, what I've seen, even being involved with like some of those first legal grows back in 2014 here in Colorado, and how this has proliferated around the country, around the world, the galvanization of this plant is awesome. So I'm going to go into a couple things like what I consider the real hemp industry to be. A lot of people have really dreamy thoughts and opinions of like, I'm going to start a CBD wellness brand and it'll be for pets and like CBD dryer sheets and on and on and on, like we could all go over and have seen. But really making things real from a viable business model as well. Having hemp investments and a very specific strategy in that, it's not just like first emerging markets, we're going to do a big hemp field, tons of CBD, and then be able to bulk sell that and partner with Martha Stewart. And now we're in Coca-Cola and Walmart. Like there's many steps to get there. The great data on that last presentation, a lot of mine comes also from like hemp benchmarks. There's a lot of good commodity like spot data out there of like, what are the true market prices? And if you're still in your financial models saying it's gonna be like $10,000 a kilo for CBD in 5 years, I mean, it's maybe a tenth of that to 20% of that in most markets. Just as a little disclaimer here, so I never get in trouble. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an accountant, managing director and CEO of Multiverse Capital, so we deal with like Reg D regulations. But this is all based on like over 14 years of legal business experience in this industry, from the first medical markets through adult use in our hemp markets. And even though it's CBD and it's legal, even you might not know why it's legal, have good legal. It's so important. Most of the problems I've seen with clients in the past, like not structuring their IP correctly, their operating agreements, their leases, their contracts, their budgets. So really good legal, really good accounting, really good guidance, mandatory in this industry to really succeed. So I've been in this for about 14 years from farm country in Wisconsin. Was lucky enough to actually see this plant grow in the Midwest in hemp fields already, and it's kind of taking over. But as I've really gone forward to see what this industry is, I've kind of realized like, where is this? But I had to understand like where we came from. You all remember like reefer madness and kind of like the background of where this is, but it's still, when you think about controlled substances and unregulated controlled substances, even if it is legal under the Farm Bill and the Agricultural Improvement Act and like going through the USDA, it doesn't just mean you can do whatever you want now. There are still rules, they're still being formed, they're still being interpreted around the globe. So it's really your responsibility to know what you can do under your state's Department of Agriculture or like your country's Departments of Agriculture. That might not be the same as what you need to do with like your departments of health or for processing food products, or so making sure you have all of those sorts of licenses. But this is a lot more risky than most people realize. Yes, we have many more banks for hemp than we do cannabis. I mean, there's over 700 total now in the US that are doing this, and it's getting more and more available and less predatory. It's no fun to pay $4,000 to $5,000 a month in some cases, and 2% on cash deposits to deal with this, or how predatory some of the payment processing solutions are for even selling hemp-derived cannabinoids online, where normal supply companies of ours maybe 2 to 3% for like credit card transactions, being able to see like 6 to 9, like there's cost to doing business in this, but you have to really know where we came from. And hemp was really why this was all made illegal in the first place, I feel, and it's really been shown. So when we see like what's happened here, like, wow, in the last 6 years to imagine what this first provision was under state departments of agriculture and institutions of higher education being able to experiment with some plants to now hundreds and hundreds of different varieties. But with 47, nearly 48 states almost soon to have like very specific types of laws and language, and then federal laws on top of that, it really is a big opportunity. But whenever there's a huge opportunity, not just even talking about in COVID times now, there's going to be a lot of people that come out for this. And if you can make 17 times more per acre than corn or soybeans, you're like, what the hell am I doing in that? And that's why many states, what's great about this is we were always this like black sheep, like the medical cannabis industry, the adult use cannabis industry. But then as this started to progress and change and hemp became a part of this, people that would never have been a part of our conversation or dialogue jumped on our bandwagon board, and it's all the same plant. Yes, if you have high pressure liquid chromatography instruments, you can analyze that and test that and know what certain percentages are of those cannabinoids, but it's still the same plant, and we got to honor that and move forward as we do this. But we have to know, like, if you don't make viable business models, it's just a dream. And it's been a beautiful dream, but I've seen nightmares along this path to where, it grows, people see these big upticks, but then you look at other aspects where like, why is this the first year in many states that they're planting less acreage? Many people had no idea what they were doing in the beginning, weren't doing soil tests, didn't get the right varieties. Any of the original people in Colorado probably could think back to, I'm not going to say names of companies or individuals here, but selling seeds for like $10 a seed and saying this is, even back then it was like, this is 4% CBD, this is 8, this is 10. And they turned out to be crappy Chinese paper varieties. And then once you're doing, or they just pissing hot, like testing hot over 0.3% THC, and it wasn't the varieties that people thought they were getting. So people literally bet their farms on these magic beans and seeds that they paid way too much money for to not actually get what they anticipated getting. So that the genetics and the stabilization of genetics has really progressed leaps and bounds over this last few years. And there's some great new companies coming out with that. But we're starting to see some changes now. I mean, just like Bob said, with the FDA, USDA side, I'll get into novel foods a bit more on the EU side, but this plant's been growing around the world for a long, long, long time. And now as countries are opening up for economic opportunities, I constantly see though that people just think it's legal. I don't have to follow anything when it comes to food processing, correct labeling. We've had clients we've had to do compliant labels in 50 states, and it's different in each state how they're labeled. You can't just do a pop-up online store and try to sell some new product. It has to be a quality product. And this is the sad thing, is being like a disabled vet and like knowing like if you're injured and there's some sort of medicine, like if someone has cancer or something, they'll do anything. And people were selling fraudulent, untested products that were actually dangerous for years. And finally, with some of those warning letters from the FDA, it kind of like woke some people up that you can't just do this in your garage and buy a few things on eBay, mix them together, buy a bunch of hemp seed oil and call it, CBD oil. And like if you're buying these products at gas stations or other places, it's probably not the best place, but like look at those labels and think about what some of these companies are selling. And that really underscored that there were hundreds of great companies in Colorado and Oregon, Washington, all over the country that were doing this well. But even some of those larger Kentucky consolidation plays, they didn't consider some of this guidance, or they didn't have good legal structures for how they raised their capital, and it caused them to tank for what we thought there might actually be. So thinking about the oversupply, currently there is an oversupply based on the demand and the proliferation of products. Because, as we move forward, I mean, many of the products that people are making, they're not following any of these guidelines. And then it turns out that they can't sell these. And when I think about all of the products that were in the EU, these like hemp stores and like CBD cafes, they're just, if you've been to Amsterdam, if you've been to Prague, just everywhere. Like I love the one where it was like payment processing loans and like also selling CBD, and you're like, oh wow, great new buzzword. But novel foods is much more important than anyone really realizes when it comes to making food supplements and products. And we talked about this for years as this was being interpreted, of how novel foods would change European produce and also the ability to import certain sorts of products to those markets. So if you're in the European space, this is much more serious than you can imagine. It takes time, it's expensive, and it's like adult stuff. And if you're trying to do products, like they'll be shut down, they won't be able to be carried by big box or any sort of distribution channels. So you have to think, what's the most compliant level of certifications or processings, standardizations that you need to follow to sell to your hardest import market? And when we think EU, it's been going on for a long time, but some of the massive plays that are happening in China, some of these other countries, Canada's been producing for a long time, but many of the things there were for the current market and current desired products. Now, this is what people think about. Thank you. Like, I love how, I hope someone would laugh. This a good friend of mine made this meme recently from Wake and Bake, and it's like there's a new cannabinoid on the street. It's like, wow, it's not just THC and CBD. There's hundreds of these, and we're barely beginning to study these. But I mean, even CBD prospectors in 2018, like it's going to be the next one. We have to get ahead of this. But there's so many cannabinoids, so many types of companies. But when you think of like Manitoba Harvest, or if you're buying hemp hearts or something in the United States, most likely it's coming from those companies. They were purchased to like add positive things to balance sheets for some of those large overinflated public companies in Canada. But these millions of uses, when I see that all the, like we're going to build the houses out of hempcrete, carbon sequestration, all these great things, they're really lacking about $250 million in the United States of infrastructure investment and development for the decorders, the redders, the processors, the massive industrial 1,000-liter CO2 and ethanol type instruments. They exist, they're expensive, and you need to have quality biomass coming into them. And if you're going to go into some of these new channels, just know it's not about trying to like create something. It's like, how do I make something that's for a positive exit from like my IP, or what can I sell to Dow, DuPont, like Monsanto? Sorry to say it, but that's the exit that investors are looking for. You having a hemp farm in Tennessee and growing 20 acres and doing some CBD processing in some barn, and then you're going to bulk offload it to someone else. Well, there's about 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 other people thinking that exact same thing. And they have been for years. You're late to the game on that. And the game already exploded. So what's going to differentiate you as like a potential exit strategy, and knowing your cost, knowing your genetics, having stable genetics, and realizing that hemp farmers, just like, from childhood, it's like how you bond together with other farmers. to be able to get into other new markets. Otherwise, you're selling to your neighbors, and they all got tomatoes too. So kind of like in conclusion here, it's like you don't want to CBD me right now. I love that meme. But most current businesses are going to fail. I know that as an investor. I know that having worked with hundreds of hemp operators, when they call with problems, and if you, before you get into problems and have to deal with them, plan your operation. Realize this is an agricultural commodity, as stated, and there are seasons, there are agricultural vectors, there's cost components, there's force majeure act of gods, of tornadoes and crazy hailstorms or grasshoppers. So you have to get ahead of these things with planning and have an option to get this to market. Because if not, you're just producing a bunch of a product and it doesn't make sense from a viable business model. So I'm not sure if there's any time for questions at all. Just really pleasure to meet all of you virtually here and share my wonderful new luck, and wishing everyone some good success out there with this plant this year.
Nick, I just had a super quick question for you. When we were looking into getting into hemp, one of the things that I was consulted on when it came to credit card processing is to get multiple processors, because we had a situation, I think it was last year sometime, where the credit card processors just stopped taking hemp money and a lot of people had no way to collect money. What is your opinion on that? Do you feel people should have more than one processor when getting into the hemp industry?
Well, more than one anything. I think COVID more than anything taught us that we cannot be reliant on single supply chains for anything that's vital to your business model. So be it your seeds and someone not being able to deliver your 100,000 clones on time, or your greenhouses or your payment processing, you always have to have redundant systems in these businesses. I mean, we've seen companies shaken to the core over something like that, or running out of the packaging like someone mentioned. Like when you look into like Sana Packaging, some of the other new ones coming up that do great hemp products that aren't the Chinese varieties, I mean, they're able to capture major new market share. So with payment processing, there's also some aspects with where they're located and the taxes that can go into that. But there's plenty of them now. So negotiate your best deal and always have a contingency for any single point of failure.
Thank you. That is such great advice and a wonderful talk today. It was really great having you, Nick.
Thanks, everybody.
We are going to now go to our next speaker, Ms. Kim McCarthy. Kim is the founding partner for the Pipeline Strategies. Having consulted for 20 years, Kim entered the financial services arena with FINRA licensing, S6, S26, and S63 to champion the role of AVP recruiting and marketing, leading Forrester's independent BD IRA FESCO through a 3-year growth period for both. Kim became a solopreneur, which I love this new terminology, with the Pipeline Recruiting, offering talent advisory and recruiting services along with the recruitment, marketing, and creative campaigns. In 2019, Kim entered the cannabis and digital marketing arena by launching Harvest and Plume on the hemp side and the cannabis section serving both sides of the plant. Her services expanded, offering people strategies to guide organizations towards opportunities and branding themselves as an employer of the choice. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Kim McCarthy.
Hi, thank you very much, Tracy. Honestly, that cuts down a lot of just talking about myself. It's good.
Kim, sorry to interrupt, Kim, but it's a little hard to hear you. We may need to have you turn your volume up just a little.
All the way. How about that?
Okay, great. Thank you so much. The floor is yours, ma'am.
Okay. So having that background, let me tell you how I came into the industry. And it was really by default. My son was diagnosed with allergy-induced asthma of unknown origin. And he was, I think it was in 6th grade at the time. So I was looking for a lot of clean alternative living situations. And that took me down a rabbit hole for a long time. And in that process, I found it was very difficult to find factual information, relevant information, and current information that wasn't leveraged or sponsored, sponsored studies. And so having a background in people strategies, which includes training and leadership development and creating all of the materials, adult learning theory, I saw this as a great opportunity to create a digital publication for the general public, but really B2B and B2C, but an actual legitimate place where you can get the factual information, but it turns into eye candy. And because it's photojournalism and adult learning theory that's put into the formatting, and what it does is create a sense of bond and pursuit for literally the knowledge as you're going through this process. So knowing what I had gone through, and that allowed me to come out of the cannabis closet And when I would try to deliver this information to others, family or friends, it didn't matter. There's still a lot of belief system and stigma around it. So that's why I came up with this opportunity. And then I wanted to make sure, because really my background's all in people strategies, I wanted to make sure that this would create opportunities for others. So that's why this is a little bit different. I'm going to share my screen, and I will end up giving you the link to this. And what I want you to do after you get the link is to literally explore on the screen, because it's about an experience. Here we go. My screen. Sorry about that. There we go. So I just went over my background here. Oh my. Sorry, I'm used to working on a Mac, and now I'm on a PC. Everything's backwards. So when you go on to here, you'll see that I have two different digital publications. Harvest and Plume is all about hemp, everything hemp. The Cannabis Sessions is everything plus THC. But we want to focus on the hemp industry for now. And all of these opportunities I've been able to showcase. And in one of all of these, by the way, are taken from all of the issues. And this happens to be talking about the green rush. And you can see that the categories, all these opportunities in the industry being consulting, cultivation, testing, legal, compliance, media, marketing, it goes on. But the great thing is that we can see how this is building. And by having this information, we can also see the areas that are lacking, and guarantee there's always going to be a correlation between where it's lacking in the professional area. You're going to be finding a lot of misinformation and false prophets online. So moving along, we have, I love this. I'm a huge art fan. And this particular, these are two different artists. And the Snoop painting is with cannabis and cannabis paint. And I absolutely adore, this is by David Cal Lawrence. And he does all sorts of industry celebrities, but also a lot of Native American art as well. And then people who are in the industry, the other one happens to be by Jo Swigert in Oklahoma. And she's a tattoo artist and artist on canvas. And we see other areas. Mohan Sundraisen, he has this fantastic ability to literally and creatively weave his philosophy in with his art. And it's taken on through the cannabis industry. Excuse me. And then Diego Beckhart. So moving out of that, then a little bit into the artistic flair, hempstone being different from hempcrete. Hempstone is a different type of, it's really like a paper mache, but virtually indestructible. And I came across this industrial engineer and artist who, his name is Jacob Frank. And anyway, he designs canna guitars, and they're absolutely amazing. And it's through hempstone. And here we go. So then, of course, that brings in Morris Beagle and his hemp guitars as well, and seeing the difference between them and these wonderful opportunities in creating more art through the music industry. Then taking that on to hempcrete, this is absolutely fascinating, and this is where it actually started for me, because the walls are, using hempcrete is really one of the best living situations that an asthmatic could live in. And this was the beginning of my many rabbit holes I went down. Since then, I've actually designed on paper, not by architect, but I've designed 5 different homes utilizing the concepts of sustainability and hempcrete. More opportunities. And then, of course, a lot of people may already know about hempwood cabinets. And there's this awesome company in Kentucky, and they've come up with hempwood flooring. It's the Hempwood company. And I mean, things are just exploding. And I love to be able to create a platform and a venue to showcase that this isn't about the THC cannabinoid. And I wish more people would understand that all of that's broken down into cannabinoids, which also on the plant side, breaking that apart into creating industrial products such as this. You move into textiles. You can go from literally building your home to furnishing your home with everything in hemp. You have your clothing. Moving on to nonprofits, the hemp industry, we're showcasing, looking for sponsorship. I just received this 2 days ago that we're now going to be looking for NASCAR sponsors, specifically for hemp and CBD, because NASCAR recently approved those as sponsors. So this is a really big opportunity that not only do I want to showcase, but it also allows the industry to grow, and it's a place where you can provide factual information and share it and not feel bad about it. It's eye candy you want to share. So I'm going to share the link so you can actually go through this on your own, and I'll open this up to Tracy.
That was great, Kim. Thank you so much. I had a question for you about hempcrete specifically, because I'm so fascinated by this. What kind of adoption are you seeing right now in construction as a whole compared to maybe what you saw 2 and 3 years ago?
It's a little different because I live in Boulder, and Boulder has a bubble, and it's called the Boulder bubble. When you live not in the mountains, then you live by and with different zoning ordinances and codes, and things change. So I see when it's in the mountains, and my mountains are that way, you do see a lot of the more sustainability, and they also have to do with fire remediation and making sure, how can your house withstand a forest fire? Well, guess what? Hempcrete can.
Really?
Oh yeah, it won't burn.
That is not a fact that I was aware of. Can you explain that a little bit in more detail? We still have another minute left.
Sure. Hempcrete really is just 3 ingredients. It's water, hemp hurd, and limestone. Well, after it cures, it basically fossilizes. It won't burn.
Oh, I had no idea. You actually taught me something new, which is kind of hard to do.
Well, thank you. But you know what? All of that you can find in these digital publications, which is the purpose of having adult learning theory. It gets it in there with eye candy.
That is absolutely wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today. That was a wonderful presentation.
Thanks so much.
All right, guys, now we are going to move over to our panel portion of the show. This panel is going to be called Leveraging Celebrities and Influencers in the Hemp Industry. I'm going to be welcoming one of my favorite people in the industry as your moderator today, which is Mr. Jim Baudino. Jim will be the moderator for this panel, and we're going to be introducing you to some incredible pro athletes, Mr. Riley Cote and Anna Simmons. Jim, I'm going to tell you a little bit about him first before I turn it over, though. He is an advisor, an investor, an award-winning executive that's currently a partner at Fiorella Agency. This is a brand incubator and leading creative and strategic communications company. That was a hard one to say. He started his career in cannabis and hemp with Snoop Dogg and founded the global platform Mary Jane Media. Jim is a global speaker, and he's been focused on raising awareness that benefits the cannabis industry and its long history, while also dispelling all the stigmas that are out there while educating on social and economic issues and injustices. Prior to the cannabis industry, Jim spent 10 years with Toyota North America, where he held leadership roles in marketing and business development, with the latest overseeing national sponsorship and partnership strategies for Toyota's lineup, including 20 celebrities and athletes. He spearheaded relationships with brands like NBC, GoPro, NBA, Pepsi, and Live. Along with internal awards for innovation, Jim was a recipient of the auto industry's prestigious Automotive News 40 Under 40 Award. Please help me welcome my dear friend and colleague, Mr. Jim Baudino.
Hi, Tracy. Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a great lineup of respected voices in the industry. Didn't expect you to go through my whole resume, but thank you for providing that overview. So you have a great lineup today, but I just wanted to give a quick overview. One of the areas we focus on at Fiorello is leveraging celebrities and influencers to support brand growth. Over my 5 years in cannabis and my previous life with Toyota, I've seen it all, the good, the bad, and ugly, how brands work with celebrities and influencers. And, brands, they've been using celebrities and influencers for centuries. Beginning in the 1760s, where royal endorsements were used to promote products like pottery and chinaware. Over the years, we've seen a variety of well-known musicians, actors, professional athletes, TV personalities, and social media influencers promote a variety of products from alcohol to headphones. So more recently, we've seen significant increase in the number of celebrities and influencers advocating for cannabis and hemp. Some coming out with their own products, or some being used to support specific brands. Now, I am honored to be joined by Riley Cote and Anna Simons, two professional athletes that have been advocates for cannabis and hemp well before it was a trend. They've been vocal about the benefits of cannabis and have been instrumental in bringing the conversation to a mainstream audience. So Riley is the former NHL player and currently a partner in a hemp-derived CBD and functional mushroom recovery product line called Body Check Wellness, and is also the process of building out a hemp processing facility and a curriculum with the Pennsylvania State University called Advanced Alchemy Labs. Now, Anna is a player in the USA Rugby Women's Premier League and is the Director of Education for East Fork Cultivars and serves on the Oregon Cannabis Commission's Research Leadership Committee. So thank you both for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. Anna. Riley, your face is looking better.
It's looking better.
Fight with poison sumac.
Yeah, quick recovery. But yeah, it was ugly for a couple of days. So I'm thankful I'm actually able to see the screen today. So.
well, thank you both. Now, I just wanted you to each take a moment to provide some insight into how you were introduced to the cannabis and hemp industries and how it's made an impact in your life. So Anna, I'd love to start with you.
Sure. Well, first, so, so what I learned from that wasn't really the big deal that we were being told that in terms of harm or doing drugs, especially as a young athlete, you're really discouraged from cannabis. Decades before I reached a place where I understood cannabis to be the medicinal herb that it is, and hemp, and all the plants in that genus, and then began to use it more strategically to support my wellness and athletic performance, specifically around pain relief, anti-inflammatory properties, getting good rest and sleep, mood and anxiety, all of these wonderful potential therapeutic properties that it offers.
Great, thank you. So Riley, what's been your history?
Yeah, so I guess my relationship with cannabis goes back to 15, 16 years old when I was introduced to it in a very recreational setting with no understanding of the medicinal value. I used it throughout my junior hockey and pro hockey career. I think it started resonating with me that it was actually really helping with anxiety and sleep, especially when I started fighting within the hockey game for a living. But it wasn't until I retired, and part of my retirement, it was an exit strategy to avoid a traditional substance abuse program and to kind of reel in my wellness and focus on self-care and self-love. Started studying natural alternatives, obviously cannabis being the main one, psilocybin mushrooms. But when I started understanding these other minor cannabinoids and started understanding cannabis as medicine, I started to make sense of it all. And that's when I really started to use it with intention and all the things that Anna mentioned there. I started to make sense of my past relationship with it. So, being a fighter in hockey, the biggest one that I was trying to manage was my concussion issues, my post-concussion syndrome. And, I recognized and learned that the US government held a patent on cannabinoids as neuroprotectants and antioxidants. So it kind of flicked the switch, and it all made sense to me. And, outside of just the medicinal component of cannabis that we're talking about here, what really got me attracted to it was, the nutritional profile of the hemp seed. So I started understanding these different dimensions of the cannabis plant that I'd never really been introduced to. I think I remember growing up and, having a hemp bracelet, and that was the only real association between cannabis and hemp and this industrial world that, you know, was misunderstood. So making sense of this all, when it all kind of happened right as I retired, that I became extremely passionate about it and felt the need to advocate for it. And I started a nonprofit back then called the Hemp Foundation, and just started speaking. Still do a music festival in Philly, just with Hemp Music Festival, and just started just kind of helping show the different faces of cannabis. Again, the nutritional components, the textiles, the building applications, obviously the medicinal and therapeutic applications. And then eventually those efforts kind of came back full circle into the sports world, and just started realizing, wow, that, you know, athletes really do have a powerful platform to make change. And eventually my efforts turned into a different nonprofit that I helped co-found. It was called Athletes for Care. And then it started really just trying to help guys with, you know, retirement and, you know, the transition into the real world. But a lot of these guys were banged up with physical injuries, concussion issues, and just really a lack of identity and purpose. So tying in the cannabis plant into that seemed like a logical fit. And, you know, it was, the rest was history, you know, as far as my involvement in cannabis space, just really riding that sports platform to normalize and destigmatize cannabis, not just the medicine, but, you know, the whole entire cannabis plant.
Great. Well, thank you for that background. Now, I would like to get in a little bit more detail about what you're currently working on. Annie, can you provide some insight into your current role with East Fork Cultivars?
Yeah, I'm the Director of Education for East Fork, which is an Oregon farm that grows both traditional state-licensed cannabis with a focus on breeding for different CBD ratios, and then also craft hemp, which is the same plant, some of the same varieties, but legally, of course, having a low enough THC level to legally qualify as hemp. So this was a really nice expansion, I guess, of my personal passion and experience into my professional life. I had started working in the cannabis industry sort of by accident. It was opportunity to help a family friend with their business, and it also really supported the things I was learning through my personal experience. I got a spinal injury in 2013, a herniated disc and 2 bulging discs above it that gave me a lot of acute pain at the time, and then chronic pain that I've had since. And I found cannabis to be by far the best resource for managing that pain and managing my physical condition while still allowing me to pursue my passion and play rugby. And then specifically, I became interested in CBD as I started hearing more about it in 2014. And with that personal interest, it opened up doors for the opportunity at East Fork. So now I actually get to spend all my time reading cannabis research, going to conferences, or back when they were in person. Now we'll have them online, and then teaching that cannabis science to others in a way that's understandable and helps them make decisions that empower their health and wellness. So it's been very rewarding to have something that I believe in that's done so much for me, and to be able to take that and share that with others in a way that truly improves their lives.
Great, thank you. And as far as the education that you're providing, what sorts of outlets do you leverage to get that education out?
Oh, we've done a few different things. First, we focused on dispensary staff. So here in Oregon, obviously cannabis is state legal, and especially a few years ago, there was a real need for additional education in that retail arena, where perhaps the folks who worked at those shops were enthusiastic about cannabis, but maybe didn't know a whole lot about CBD in particular. And so we developed a free education workshop called CBD Certified. And I went around in person to more than 100 different dispensaries in Oregon and did the workshop with the staff at these shops. So we had that in-person component, which was great. And then we sort of shifted things online as well. So obviously that's the way these days in general, but even before COVID, started doing online webinars to increase the reach of getting the information out there.
And then with your role in the Oregon Cannabis Commission's Research Leadership Subcommittee, what is the objective of the organization, and what are some of the things that you've been doing to date?
That's a group that contains mostly medical professionals from different disciplines and other stakeholders in medical cannabis research. And the goal of that subcommittee is to sort of direct the commission to what the most relevant research is, the most important research, and what they should be paying attention to. So with COVID, it's interrupted our schedule a bit, but it does seem like a group that has a lot of knowledge, a wealth of knowledge and perspectives on it. So I'm pretty optimistic that we'll be able to contribute some really important guidance to the bureaucratic commissions that regulate cannabis and hemp in our state.
Thank you. So Riley, you touched on it briefly, but I'd love for you to go a little bit more detail about Body Check Wellness and some of the other programs you're working on, especially with the university and the education as well.
Sure, yeah. So Body Check Wellness is a hemp-derived CBD and functional mushroom company. Part of my healing of the concussion issues was, yes, cannabis and CBD, but also functional mushrooms like lion's mane and chaga and reishi and the rest of them. So naturally, it seemed like a fit to blend the two worlds together. So and also understanding that you know, the direction of the hemp-derived CBD space was saturated, and we wanted to, you know, be a little bit unique in that regard. So, you know, integrating mushrooms with hemp seemed like a logical fit based on my experience. So, you know, all things wellness, coming out with a couple different mushroom blends outside of the CBD space. So just trying to just stay somewhat diverse with that. But that project is on its own, and then we have Advanced Alchemy Labs, which we actually signed this LOI with the Cheney University. It's the oldest historically Black university in the U.S. and they've been struggling financially, and the state stepped in, and they wanted to, you know, create a robust, progressive type of curriculum, bringing in, you know, sustainable, progressive industry. Obviously, hemp fits that bill. So we had an opportunity to work with their team the last 6 months, and right before COVID hit, we signed the LOI, and obviously threw a little wrench in the progression of it. But it's an extraction facility and lab, as well as a soil to oil curriculum. We're going to actually help build out, you know, just the like I said, the soil to oil component to the curriculum, helping the students understand cultivation all the way through the processing and marketing of the product. So in the middle of that, should be a pretty interesting model. The state's behind it, obviously, state-run university. So lots of interesting things there. And then we'll tie in that to Body Check Wellness once it's all up and running. And then outside of the hemp-derived CBD space, I am working with grassroots cannabis and herbology dispensary within the Pennsylvania, mainly Philly area, on just community education. So doing, well, before COVID, in-person educational community events, and since COVID, it's been online, just content creation and Zoom type of informational and educational type of panels and discussions. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Right. It's great to see you both so involved with education. And I mean, that's one of the most important aspects of the cannabis industry, is to educating the population, but also whether it's brands and agencies, people in marketing, people in investments, really on just the basic level of the cannabis plant. So appreciate you both doing that work. So I did want to get into a little bit more about the organization Athletes for Care. I know Riley is the co-founder and Anna is ambassador. Can you talk a little bit more about the organization and some of the work that you've been doing and some of the people that have been involved along with you?
Sure. Yeah, this goes back about 3.5 years or so, just being on the speaking circuit, in the cannabis space, around cannabis conferences. I started running into the same old faces, and a lot of synergy all around, and just based on what they were going through and how cannabis helped increase their quality of life, save their life, or all the above. And naturally, it seemed fitting. Well, why don't we kind of come together and form an official organization to help not just athletes, but the general public too, right? We realized that the type of issues that athletes were dealing with mimics what's going on in society. So we recognize that, the identity crisis, the lack of purpose for a lot of people, just transitioning from different jobs to another, and just the way people, and say athletes in this case, were managing their pain, physical pain, emotional pain, spiritual pain. So naturally, cannabis was a great tool to introduce athletes to, and just educate this alternative medicine component. It's evolved since then. That was kind of helping guys in the moment transition out of the game, replace, whether it's opioids, alcohol, or just Ambien and all these other, toxic pharmaceuticals that athletes seem to be dependent on or addicted to. Outside of just that, it landed up being, there's a bigger picture here to helping people. It's job placements, it's opportunity, it's speaking engagements, it's building brands, it's all these different components. So we've started extending our tentacles, if you will, and started having different programs and opportunities presented to the players. Again, not just selfishly for athletes, but to extend into the community and help normalize this for the general public. Because for whatever reason, I kind of understand why, being an athlete now, why people say the general public looks up to athletes, and it's only because they put their body on the line, the physical demanding sports, concussions, the whole bit. And if they can get relief from something like this, it makes sense for them that it might work for them. So besides just spreading the good word and at events and community driven events, we're engaging in different research initiatives too. Again, not just selfishly for the athlete, it's to push out to the general public, so they can grab onto this outside of just anecdotal stories. And then just recently, I think the most recent initiative we've engaged in since COVID hit was a Save Youth Sports initiative. And I think whether you played pro sports or collegiate sports or whatever level you got to, it all started with youth sports, and just the powerful impact this youth sports has on developing, again, not just athletes, people, right? I mean, there's all kinds of structure and positive outcomes that come in with the youth sports program. So just trying to raise awareness, find sponsors to help fund some of these youth sports programs, because I mean, COVID's obviously affected everyone's life in some way, shape, or form. And we're talking about the youth here now, and without youth sports, they're going to have to find other things to do. So just kind of raising awareness around that. I know in the grand scheme of what we're dealing with, it seems like really a non-priority, but I really think it is a priority, because we have to create structure for our youth, especially when times are crazy and there's a lot of instability. So that's our most recent project is the Save Youth Sports program. And yeah, we're just kind of building as we go, but it's all things wellness. Cannabis is just a tool. It's one of many powerful tools. We talk about integration into wellness with these types of tools: meditation, yoga, breath work, just nutritional healing. So we talk about all these things, but obviously we have an opioid crisis on our hands, and cannabis would be naturally the most immediate tool to replace that and help increase quality of life for everyone.
Yeah, I would say also, in addition to what Riley discussed, Athletes for Care has just been an opportunity for us to pay it forward. I think the people involved in the group have had profound personal experiences of healing and, their lives really improving. And they feel passionate about sharing those truths and making that medicine accessible to everyone. So, with that advocacy comes things like Marvin Washington's lawsuit against the DEA, which is ongoing and has the potential to really reform not only this industry but medicine in our country. The petition that we did to the World Anti-Doping Agency to remove THC from the banned in competition substance list, and other types of advocacy that we as athletes have, we can use our platform to really put out into the public awareness.
Anna, can you share a little bit about your experience with pain management while you're playing? What are the doctors telling you? Just give a scenario to the audience about what it's like as a professional athlete to be having to deal with so much pain and what you're being told.
Well, for my sport, it's a little different than some of the other leagues, just because rugby is a much less known sport here in the US and less financially supported. So what that means is that, I don't have a team doctor that is telling me you need to take this. But on the other hand, it's up to me to find the medical resources I need to care for myself. And even when I'm making those medical decisions for myself, I am still making them the way that an athlete does, which is with a great deal of commitment to the team and the goals of the team. So even if it's not a paycheck that's on the line for me necessarily, it could be, we're going to playoffs and I know that I'm needed on the field. So for example, one year that was the case, and I had I suffered an avulsion fracture in my foot, which is when your ligament rips a chunk of bone off of your bone, and it's really painful, swells up like crazy. And so I was taking indomethacin, which is a very powerful prescription anti-inflammatory, for about 6 weeks, and I got bleeding ulcers and just stomach pain and nausea, and it allowed me to compete through the end of the season. And I wouldn't have changed that decision, but now with what I know about the anti-inflammatory properties of CBD, for example, I would have tried that route, doing high doses of CBD to see if that could control the inflammation. And of course, THC I was already using for pain management. But I've prescribed everything under the sun in terms of painkillers, anti-inflammatories, muscle relaxants. I've had trigger point injections injected into spasming muscles. I've had a couple surgeries. I've had broken bones and chipped teeth and all these things. And there's something about athletes that just makes us, well, I guess there's probably a few things, like a predisposition to ignore pain and focus on the goal, and to not give up and really pursue our passions with complete commitment. So I think that the tough part comes, like Riley alluded to, with retirement. You start going, oh, look at the condition of my body, and now I've got to live with this for a lifetime. And especially when that includes components of brain health and the head injuries that we tend to get in especially contact sports. There's a lot of reckoning that comes into play, and you go, okay, if I'm in my late 30s and it hurts, to get out of bed or stand for more than 30 minutes or, all these things, then what am I going to feel like in 10 years and 20 years and 30? So it's really kind of stepping away from that model of symptom treatment that we so often turn to in allopathic Western medicine, and really trying to get to the root of healing, like Riley also alluded to, with the physical dimensions, but also the mental, emotional, and the spiritual dimensions of holistic medicine, which is where I think, again, plant medicine can be so powerful.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. So I did want to now touch on a little bit more around celebrities and influencers in the space, because there are so many new brands coming out and new celebrities and everyone saying they're using CBD for some treatment of various issues. So how can celebrities and influencers best advocate for cannabis, and what have you found to be most effective in your own lives? For now, this is just advocating for the general use of it, and then we'll get into the brand question later. And Riley, you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah. I think just being genuine with how it's working, right? I mean, I think you got a handful of athletes that are very well educated and they have the experience of using these products. And then you have a handful of athletes that just got introduced to it and they're having amazing, amazing success using these products and just want to, stand on the rooftop and shout it out. And so you got different versions of how they are influencing, but I think just being genuine with your story, and I think the story is the medicine. What I've learned in these in the cannabis space and the plant medicine space in general, it's a powerful thing. So whether you can list off 20 cannabinoids or not, I don't think that's really the point. I think it's being vulnerable, being genuine, sharing your stories and how it's helped you. And I think people connect with that. I think influencing in this space more than, selling cars and, other things, I think it really does connect with people when you're sincere and you speak from the heart. So that's from my own personal experience and what I've seen.
Great. Thank you. Anna, how about you?
I completely agree with everything Riley said. I think honesty and integrity is really integral to an endorsement, so to speak. I think, you don't really want somebody who's in it just for the paycheck. Not only because, I mean, for multiple reasons, but really this is, it's, as an effective endorsement, you do want someone who really believes, who has that same passion for your product that you do, because they've experienced the effectiveness of it, which really ties into the social responsibility around cannabis medicine and hemp CBD medicine. It is something people use as medicine, and it is a therapeutic substance. So it's really not just another shampoo or what consumer product. So we do have a responsibility to make sure that we are creating medicine that's both pure and effective, whether that's just at the level of a supplement or if it's something that's more potent and is really going to be addressing more serious medical conditions.
I think that's important for the influencers and any celebrity getting into the space to really understand the product and do their research and make sure that the product's effective and all of the benefits it states, being cautious about that. It's above board. It's following regulations because you wouldn't want that impacting yourselves. Now, as far as brands, and when brands are getting into the space, how can they leverage influencers and celebrities, even brands that are starting off that may not have the budget? What do you recommend brands being able to do to get those influencers and potential celebrity partners just to help promote themselves and their brand? Anna, continue with you.
Sure. I think some of that is connecting with the right people, particularly if you don't have a big budget. That might actually end up being a good thing for you because you'll have to work a little harder to find the right people, but that gives you a greater chance of finding someone who sincerely loves your product and will endorse it wholeheartedly and in perhaps, exchange for free product. And that might be all for some folks. I think another important factor is, as Riley kind of pointed out, there are people who have been outspokenly talking about these issues for a while in the public eye. And then there are a lot of folks who are newer to the scene. And we welcome everyone to join the party, but recognize that you have some extra credibility if you align yourself with people who have been sharing this message and have taken it upon themselves to advocate even before it was so popular and when it was more risky. So you can gain a lot of credibility that way as well.
Got it. Okay, we are running out of time. I think there's one question. Tracy, can we answer that?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Riley, what do celebrities and athletes look for in companies when deciding who to endorse and market with?
I just think it goes back to what Anna was just talking about. You find a brand that you connect with, right? I mean, if you're heavy into the recreational cannabis, you would align yourself with a company that's really branding themselves as a high THC recreational cannabis brand. If you're more in the science of it, or more in the non-psychoactive side of it, you align with someone that's a little bit more in that world and research heavy and whatnot. I think it just ends up being the individual connecting with the right brand. I think this is again a little bit different than finding that car dealership or that shampoo company, because I think there's so many different companies, and then the philosophies, at least on the medicinal side of whether it's cannabis or hemp, are very similar. But there is there is still some philosophy differences, especially when you start leaching over into the recreational type of world. So I think it's just all based on the individual itself. I mean, how much are you willing to put yourself out there? How educated are you on these products? Or you just want to put your face on there? Or do you want to do actual education and actually, getting in the community and talking about this? So everyone's at a different level in their, in their cannabis journey. And based on that, I think it's the decision lands up being just how much or little you want to get involved in, and the type of brands you want to get involved with.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Tracy, for having us.
That was a wonderful, wonderful talk. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week, and thanks for coming today.
All right.
Thanks
Thanks
for having
Anna.
me.
Thanks, Riley.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. All right, guys, we are going to now move on to our next speaker, Mandy Lyle. She is the founder and CEO of Potency No. 701. Growing up, her father spent 13 years of his life in prison for marijuana and other marijuana. And although this stigma has been carried with it, Mandy has took it as inspiration to show everyone the beauty in the potent of this plant. She opened her first skincare clinic at the ripe age of 20, quickly developing a knack for plant-based, non-toxic products. And when she moved to LA, she found herself walking through clouds of smoke as her and her fiance ventured into the cannabis business. The two applied their combined knowledge of both skincare and cannabis industry to create Potency No. 710, a line of balanced beauty products fueled by non-toxic plant-powered ingredients, with one of their favorites being full-spectrum hemp CBD. As a girl formerly from Tennessee, it is my pleasure to welcome a fellow Southerner, Miss Mandy Lyle.
Hi, Tracy. Thank you for that introduction. Part of my first few minutes was going to be introducing myself, if you didn't. So I have a background in aesthetics. I worked alongside a well-known physician for several years. So I'm coming from like the medical side of the small business. My father, as you know, you just said, I was kind of born into cannabis. I knew what a grow was before I went to kindergarten, and probably spent more time in prisons than theme parks growing up as a child. I was never mad at my dad for this. I just was mad at the law, I guess, because I couldn't figure out why my dad kept going to jail over a plant. So with that being said, I took a lot of that inspiration. And when I moved to LA, I decided I wanted to be in a bigger city. I met my now fiance for many years, and we are in the legal side of the cannabis business, which I was very leery of when he told me he was going to be going into the cannabis business. I said, I'm going to the courthouse with you. I'm going to make sure this is really legit. I did not have any desire to relive my childhood. With those three things in mind, with my background in the medical aesthetic business, my passion for plant-based ingredients, with my 40 plus years of street credit from my dad, watching all of the different walks of life coming out of our home. Thank God my mom was balanced and had divorced him early on, so I kind of got the best of both worlds. I think that's how I ended up a little bit balanced out. But with that, and then Harry going into cannabis, and we now have 2 cannabis stores, and we're vertically integrated here in Needles, California, is where our stores are based out of. We're actually based out of North Hollywood, but we have a place here and come here to work those stores as well. In between all of that, I started seeing all of the benefits of CBD and how it was going to be a strong antioxidant, even stronger than vitamin C and E. And something just clicked in my head that this is what it is. This is what is bigger than what you dream. This is what you're going to do. You're going to create a product and you're going to bring CBD to beauty. So I've been said I'm disrupting the beauty industry with this ingredient, but I definitely think it's here to stay. I do not think it's a fad. And what I'm seeing happening with my products personally are an array of skin issues being solved in a very short period of time. Now, as the attorney spoke on earlier, we are not allowed to make claims, but I wake up every morning to some amazing before and after photos of people's skin that have transitioned in a 3-day period. So I do believe that it's definitely here to stay in beauty. I pulled up some facts. During COVID, the prestige beauty market went down by about 14%. But the winners in this group was your hand sanitizers, your non-utility skincare, and your self-care, which includes CBD. And I love the fact that when we were deemed essential, I was like, wow, how ironic that I spent so much time in my life before visiting my dad in prison for selling marijuana, and now I'm selling marijuana and it's essential. So it was really mind-blowing when that happened, and it was listed right underneath the grocery stores. So we were all thankful for that. They project that the CBD beauty industry, hemp beauty industry market, is going to be at $959 million by 2024. So I think continuing education is going to be key in the beauty market, and I believe people are going to be more reluctant to try a topical product than an ingestible. So I believe it's for the beauty industry, I'm doing as much as I can as far as educating and bringing out more blogs about CBD as an antioxidant and about all the powers that this plant really has. And I hope that in the end, I just hope that this plant brings peace to this world, in a world that so much needs peace right now. I just hope it's the plant that's just going to bring us all together and really change the way we look at medicine and ingredients and products.
Mandy, thank you so much for that. Such an inspirational story. I'm so inspired by your fight to continue to bring so much positivity to this plant. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you. Thank you, Tracy. You're amazing.
Thank you. All right, everyone. That wraps up our speaker portion of the show today. I hope you enjoyed all of these incredible speakers as much as I did. I learned some awesome new things.